Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar, Strengthening Family Service Agreements and CPS in-Home Services. It is 10:30, so let's get started. If you haven't already done so, you'll see a link there on the middle of your screen for click here for handouts. Also on the right side of your screen, there's a little file share pod for your handouts. Go ahead and download those. Click on those. We're going to in particular have a case scenario that we'll do a little bit later, so keep that handy. I'll give you just a moment to click on that. Okay. A quick note about the webinar. It was developed through funding from the North Carolina Division of Social Services by the Family and Children's Resource Program, which is part of the Jordan Institute for Families here at UNC Chapel Hill School of Social Work. It's being recorded and it will be available soon on NCSW Learn. Here are our goals for the webinar today. So we know family services agreements are a backbone in providing in-home services. It's a living tool that we continue to use to engage families and their supports as we assess their needs, progress, and accomplishments. We've learned through both the program monitoring process as well as the on-site review instrument process that there's a continued need to strengthen these agreements so we can improve outcomes for families. So by the end of the webinar, we hope you're able to know what's expected of FSAs. We'll be presenting some program monitoring information and some information on what the monitors look for so you can avoid common errors as you develop FSAs. We'll be describing some strategies beginning with building a solid foundation through comprehensive assessments. And by the end of the webinar, you should understand how important it is to encourage good communication that will facilitate a smooth transition for a family between CPS assessments and in-home services. Communicating with us. So many of you have already figured this out. The chat box there. You can send a message to everyone, as many of you are doing, or you could send a message just to the host, meaning those of us here at UNC. So this will be the primary way that you guys are going to be able to communicate with us. Please type in any questions or comments as we go along. It can move pretty fast, as you can tell, but we do have someone that's going to keep track of your questions. We'll look for opportunities for the presenters to answer your questions during the presentation. All right, since this is just a 90-minute webinar, we have some great presenters with a lot of information to share. We may not be able to address every single question. We'll certainly do our best, but we will develop a follow-up document that answers questions asked during this webinar. The document will be emailed to all registered participants, as well as it will be posted with the webinar recording. So the webinar recording will be available not only on NCSW Learn, but also on our website, the Family and Children's Resource Program webpage that you see the link there listed. We had an overwhelming registration response for the webinar, so please encourage those that haven't been able to attend today to go ahead and review the recording. Icons is just another way that you guys can communicate with us. So you can use that little drop down of the guy at the top of your screen to, for example, tell us to speak louder, speak softer. And we want to practice really quick. So those of you who are participating in a group setting, please go ahead and use that icon to raise your hand to let us know. It would help us to know how many groups we have out there when we get around to answering questions or comments. Great, I see lots of folks raising their hand, lots of groups participating. Thank you very much. Again, I just want to welcome all of you to today's webinar. I'm Rick Seckman. I am with the Jordan Institute for Families. We have technical help from our colleagues. Instead of Philip, we have Southey Blanton pinch hitting today, and John McMahon. Just to give you a snapshot of the attendees registered, we have over 500 people representing 84 counties and division staff registered. Attendees were primarily direct staff, but we also have over 100 supervisors registered too, so thank you very much for joining us. Let me allow our presenters to introduce themselves, starting with Leslie. Can you introduce yourself, Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie Amyette. I'm a social work supervisor for in-home services from Lenoir County.
Thank you very much. How about Jessica? Can you introduce yourself?
Hey, good morning. My name is Jessica Guice-Albritton. I'm a policy consultant with the division.
Thank you, Jessica. We heard you loud and clear, but I think we need to go back to Leslie. That she was really soft. Leslie, can you try again?
Hi, I'm Leslie Amyette. I'm a social work supervisor of in-home services, and I work in Lenoir County.
There we go. Thank you. Amanda, can you introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Martin, and I'm a children's program representative.
We're going to try that again with Amanda. Make sure we got our mic going here.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Martin, and I'm a children's program representative with the North Carolina Division of Social Services in the Child Welfare section. I've been in that position for just over a year, and prior to that, I had 8 years of experience in the county as both a line social worker and supervisor in the areas of assessments, in-home services, adoptions, and foster home licensing.
Great. Got you loud and clear. Well, thank you guys for assisting us with this learning opportunity for our child welfare system. We'll certainly give all you attendees the presenters' contact information at the end of the webinar as well. Okay, here's our agenda for today. So we're going to spend the remainder of our 90 minutes together talking about a snapshot of the NCDSS program monitoring data as it relates to who typically has been involved in the development of Family Service Agreement and what content is in it, how a comprehensive assessment upfront builds a good foundation for a Family Services Agreement. We'll share an example of a county protocol they use when transitioning a family from CPS assessments to in-home services. You'll get the nuts and bolts of what's expected in Family Service Agreements, and we'll provide a few tips. We'll share a county experience with the case review process, and then we'll have some time for questions toward the end of the presentation. Okay, so as we move on to our first presenter, Amanda is going to discuss some program monitoring information.
Good morning, everyone. First, let me start by providing an overview of what program monitoring is in North Carolina. The program monitoring team visits counties twice a year and help them by building an understanding of both the requirements as well as best practices in child welfare. They're able to provide insight to the county in regards to their performance and also assist in creating a program development plan to improve agency effectiveness and efficiency. So as part of continuous quality improvement and program development, we decided to take a look at data gathered from 269 in-home services cases reviewed between July and December of 2016. From that, we decided to focus on 4 items from the in-home services program monitoring tool. And these include items 5 and 6, which are services agreement development and participation. So are the services agreements being developed and with who? Item 7, services agreement content. Is this focused on child safety and efforts to prevent repeat maltreatment? And then lastly, item 8, the services agreement reviews. Are these being formally reviewed at least every 3 months with the family and then in ongoing contacts monthly? So in taking a look at the data from the services agreement development portion of the tool, we understand that one of the key foundations to building a strong family services agreement is including the necessary participants. And regardless of when the agreement is developed, it must be developed jointly with parents or primary caretakers, their personal support systems, and the child or children as they are cognitively and or emotionally able to participate. So in the first section here, you can see we looked at the services agreement development. With the mother, we found that from the data, those service agreements were developed with the mother in the home 83% of the time. And with the father, 77% of the time. And then the outlier here is the non-resident parent, and we found that only 13% of the time were service agreements being developed with the non-resident parent. Secondly, we get to service agreement review, those being updated at least every 3 months. The in-home family services agreement must be updated at least every 3 months or whenever family circumstances warrant a change. And what we found from the program monitoring data is that that was being done with the mother 52% of the time and with the father in the home 45% of the time. Aside from formally updating those service agreements every 3 months or as circumstances warrant a change, these service agreements should be reviewed regularly during monthly contacts regardless of the risk level with families. And what we found was that 64% of the time these were a part of ongoing discussions monthly with the mother in the home. 55% of the time they were happening with the father in the home, and then only 50% of the time with the child or children that are in the home. So what that tells us, basically to summarize in regards to service agreement development, is that we tend to start off pretty strong in that development, but after that initial meeting or development, there is continued room for improvement in regards to updating those at least quarterly and then definitely during the ongoing contacts. Next, we're going to focus on the services agreement content, and as I mentioned earlier, is that focused on child safety and efforts to prevent repeat maltreatment. We look to see in the in-home services agreement if it is addressed from the strengths needs assessment. So in the 210 portion of the case, a strengths needs assessment should be completed, and we look to see if those strengths and needs are reflected within the in-home services agreement. What we found in the data, according to the data, is that 80% of the time it was reflected in regards to the mother, about 72% of the time for the father, and then 80% of the time for the child. In the next item, we look at, are the service agreements focused on child safety? Was the family services agreement focused on child safety and reasonable efforts to prevent maltreatment? So we understand the purpose of the in-home family services agreement is to specify a plan to respond to the conditions that threaten child safety or place him or her at risk, while identifying and building on the family strengths. And what we found is just over 50% that was included or reflected for the mother, and just under 50% for the father. In regards to content in the family services agreement, we also look to see what steps, if steps were included that the agency would take to help the family achieve or complete the agreement. This allows the family to understand that this is a team effort and to build partnership with the social worker and the agency. Here we see that in regards to the mother, just over 50% of the family services agreements completed with the mother did include specific steps the agency would take to help facilitate the plan. And then just under 50% for the father. Lastly, we look at well-being needs, and we're looking here to see if well-being needs for both the child and the family are included in the plan and how the social worker and family will work to ensure these issues are being addressed. These include educational, physical, and mental health needs. And what we found from the program monitoring data, again, is that 50%, just over 50% of the time, these were included for the mother, a little over 40% for the father, and then you definitely have a rise for the child, and it's just above 70%. So we're doing a great job at capturing those for the child or children in the home, but there is continued room for improvement in regards to the mother and father. So now that we've taken a look at both the development of the services agreement and the content portion of it, I'm going to let Jessica talk more with you guys about practice implications and the how-to.
So as Amanda touched on earlier, that we use not only for but also these tools are used appropriately. It makes it that much harder.
Oh, can you hear me now? Okay, thank you. And thank you, Amanda. So as Amanda had touched on earlier, the tools that are used in the assessment are crucial building blocks for a comprehensive family service agreement, but also for the subsequent good case work that's to come. If the tools aren't used appropriately to build a good foundation, then it makes it that much harder to build a good in-home services case. So the most basic tools in our toolbox are the questions that we ask and the understanding that we gain as a result, the safety agreement, our decision-making tools, and the initial family services agreement. Using these tools to their fullest extent at the front end helps prepare the family and the agency for the work to come. So the first tools I want to talk about aren't in policy or found in a form, but as an assessor, questions can really be our best tool. There are usually reasons behind the negative behavior, sometimes even positive intents, and we won't know that unless we ask the right questions. If we can find out the underlying issue, excuse me, we can ensure that we are working with the family on the right thing and maybe even prevent new cases down the road. This is especially true when we are working with the family that has suffered from trauma. Asking questions can also help us learn what works best for a family and allows us to build on their strengths. So there are different types of questions that you can try with your families. One is the exception question. All problems have exceptions, or times when the problem doesn't happen or is less of a problem. Our task is to get the exceptions to happen more often, so we need to find out what was different about those times. An example is, what is the longest time you've gone without drinking? How did you get that to happen, and how are things different then? Then there is the scaling question. Using numbers 1 to 10 can help assess the family's perception of their situation and identify ways to make progress. An example of that would be, with 1 being no desire at all to stop using and 10 you are ready to quit today, where would you put your motivation to quit using? Then there is the coping question. Asking families about how they have coped with certain challenges offers a way for them to appreciate and recognize their own skills and supports to survive their difficulties. It can help them find new energy to keep dealing with the problem and helps them see what is going well. An example is, it seems like things have been really hard lately, but you still manage to get the kids up, fed, and out the door every day. How do you do that? And finally, there is the preferred future question. If a client can describe their preferred future in terms of concrete positive results, a sense of possibility is created, and a person may be more likely to try some of these things out. What would happen at school tomorrow if things were going really well? So another great tool that we have in the assessment is the safety agreement. This is the first document that you use with the family to communicate and address the concerning behaviors. But when it's not used appropriately, it can cause confusion and delay progress. How many times have you had a family tell you about the last time they were involved with CPS and something about it just doesn't seem right? Either you can't see why the agency was involved in that situation, or the agency's response sounds inappropriate. More than likely, the issue lies in how the concerns were communicated with the family. Using simple, behaviorally specific language that clearly describes exactly what happened and the impact on the child, what we are concerned will happen if there are no acts of protection, and what actions will be taken to show the child is safe, is great for creating a shared understanding of the issue. The risk assessment and strength and needs are tools that are used to build the family services agreement. So the items that these tools identify must reflect the circumstances that you have assessed and documented. In other words, you shouldn't identify the caretaker's emotional mental health as a need when there's nothing in your case record to support that. And likewise, if you indicate on the risk assessment that the caretaker has a mental health problem, then your case record needs to have reflected that as well. Another point to mention about the appropriate use of the strength and needs is that the well-being needs should address both the child and family's needs and be very specific, which Amanda will explain more in detail. An excellent opportunity to engage the family and allow them to see what is going on is to complete the strength and needs in partnership with them. This involvement allows for a comprehensive discussion that identifies strengths and enhances cooperation. The content of the Family Services Agreement is a combination of the safety assessment, risk assessment, and strength and needs assessment, all of which are reflected in the initial Family Services Agreement or case decision summary. And speaking of the initial Family Services Agreement, this is intended to only bridge the gap between the end of the assessment and the development of the Family Services Agreement. The two documents do not have to match, as the Family Services Agreement should be developed during a CFT with the family. However, like the Safety Agreement, it is important that the concerns, activities, and goals are clear so that families and social workers can wrap their heads around what got them here and what can be done to keep the child safe. This is achieved through using behavior-specific language. In other words, mom will attend parenting classes is not a sufficient goal to achieve safety. However, mother will demonstrate the parenting skills that she has learned by using discipline techniques that do not hurt Johnny would achieve safety. Other points to mention about these tools is the needs and concerns identified on the strengths and needs and risk assessment and the activities of the temporary parental safety agreement must be reflected in this document. The initial Family Service Agreement is found in two places. At the end of the 5010 is the Case Decision Summary section, and on the DSS 5228. You do not have to do both forms. The agency has the discretion of using whichever summary it chooses. Okay, so with that, I want to direct your attention to the case scenario located in your handouts that are available now in the handout file SharePod. Click on it to open there. We're going to have you practice your skills. So as you are reading the scenario, sorry, let me put that on there. So if you're reading the scenario, think about how you would use behaviorally specific language to write an initial Family Services Agreement to address this situation. Tina, the mother, left Andre, age 2, and George, age 4, home alone while she went to the store. The children were sleeping, and Tina only meant to be gone for 10 minutes, but her car broke down, and it took her over an hour to get home. In the meantime, George woke and was found wandering the neighborhood looking for his mother. Someone called CPS. Since the incident, Tina has downplayed her actions, saying that nothing bad happened to the kids and that she did not mean to leave them for that long. The safety agreement is that Tina will either take the children with her while she runs errands or ask her mother or a neighbor to babysit. CPS has been making unannounced visits to the home to make sure there is an adult with the children at all times. However, the social worker is concerned that Tina does not seem to understand how dangerous her actions were and that she will eventually leave the kids home alone again. Now I'm going to go back to the slide on the initial Family Services Agreement so that you all can review the text that is on the actual form. And if you could please go ahead and write your suggestions in the chat box. Thanks, Edgecombe. I think I'd go a little farther and say, what does age-appropriate supervision look like to this mom? All right, thank you, Mecklenburg. The mother will ensure her children are supervised at all times by a responsible adult and will not leave them unattended anytime. I like that. I like Amanda's too. The children shall have an awake, sober adult caretaker at all times. Great. I like that, Rebecca. Mothers should demonstrate an understanding of the consequences of leaving the children unsupervised. Very good. Okay, a few more people are typing. I'm going to give you a few more minutes. Robinson County wrote, the mother will learn developmental education based on the children's ages and the amount of supervision needed based on development and maturity level. I like that. All right, a few more people are typing. Okay, great, guys. All right, let me move back. All right, just one last thing that often gets missed about the family service or the initial family services agreement is that the family should receive a copy of the initial family service agreement within 7 days of the case decision, and the parent should be asked to sign indicating that they received it. This would also be a great opportunity to discuss what the family can expect next, the CFT within 30 days, and the development of the family service agreement with their partnership. Agencies can and have developed their own protocols to smooth this transition, and Leslie is going to share with us some of the practices her agency is using.
Okay, so hey, so some of the things that are important to Lenoir County is conducting the joint visit together, discussing the case decision and the safety concerns, explaining what in-home services looks like, and having continued discussions of CFTs. So some of you guys may be wondering where Lenoir County is located. We're in eastern North Carolina along the Neuse River. Our county is very rural and has a population of about 60,000. We are about 1 hour away from the beach. So in our county, what that process looks like is the 210 and 215 worker visit the home together. The 210 worker introduces the 215 worker, and they continue that discussion regarding the case decision and what the agency and family identified as safety issues. Then the 215 worker explains their role as in-home services. They discuss mandated contacts with the families based on the risk level. They discuss the development of the family services agreement during a child and family team meeting, and they work with the family to identify more supports. We also have a form that was created in-house that our social workers are required to fill out with the family. The form is a discussion and guideline that includes why the family was found in need of services and substantiated. You have a copy of that in the pod. Some other things that the form covers is explaining to the family that we do have the authority to file petitions, how to reach a social worker after hours and the phone number, and a clear discussion of the purpose of the child and family team meeting, as well as engaging in that process. And then there's signature lines for everybody.
Leslie, there's a couple questions that are coming in. It says, how are cases assigned that allow the 210 and the 215 worker the ability to complete the joint visit together? Can you answer that?
Yeah, we have separate assessment teams and one in-home services team that I supervise. So after they make their case decision, the supervisors of the assessment teams make me aware of the case coming to our unit, and then I assign it to one of our workers. They just work together to coordinate their schedules so that as much as possible those visits can happen. There are times obviously that they don't, and we just try to document why that doesn't happen.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, and Amanda's going to discuss with us some more about CFTs.
Thank you, Leslie. As we know, Child and Family Team meetings are the vehicle for developing those family service agreements. All county DSSs should use the Child and Family Team meetings to develop the Family Services Agreement, and that should be completed within 30 days of the case decision. CFT should be held ongoing throughout the life of the case, at least every 90 days, to review and update progress in the case and/or to address barriers. There are other circumstances when a Child and Family Team meeting should be held. Those include when the family requests one. At times, the family may request a CFT. They may have potentially identified a new social support or begin to have a clear vision of the benefits of CFTs. If the family requests one, one should be held. A Child and Family Team meeting should also be held anytime there is a significant change in circumstances that would impact child safety. A CFT would allow the family and a team approach to address those issues. A Child and Family Team meeting should also be held prior to filing a petition or possible removal. This gives an opportunity for the family to identify supports, possible placements, and explain the reason for potential removal. A Child and Family Team meeting is also helpful to address stuck cases. Using a team decision-making process or approach to addressing barriers to progress also allows us to explore other alternatives. Remember to allow the family to be their own expert. If the family is a repeat for in-home services, a Child and Family Team meeting should be held prior to case closure to discuss with the family their plan to prevent repeat maltreatment in the future. So we can't talk about Child and Family Team meetings and family services agreements without talking about all of the appropriate parties and who we need to have around the table. Those include the mother, father, or other caretakers in the home, the children, non-resident parent, support persons, and then also addressing who else wasn't there. As previously discussed from our program monitoring team, that data reveals that there is room for improvement when engaging parties in the development of family service agreements. The support persons for the family allow the family to identify who those folks are. This could be family, friends, church members, or neighbors. This may also include service providers who are involved with the family. One strategy for empowering these supports is for the social worker or facilitator of the CFT to prepare them for the CFT. These support persons should understand what the Child and Family Team process looks like, the purpose, and how they may best be a support to the family. For the parties who are present and engaged in the development of the Family Services Agreement, the social worker should be creative in identifying activities that they can participate in or help with. An example of this may be that the neighbor agrees to provide transportation to the mother's appointments weekly. Again, just be creative and use critical thinking skills with the family to determine how those supports can best be looped into activities within the service agreement. And then lastly, it's important to check back in with the family at the conclusion of the CFT to determine if there were any supports or persons who were not present at the time of the meeting that they feel would be beneficial at the next one. At times, families may not see the importance of having those supports at the table until after the meeting has occurred. So transitioning from engaging all of the appropriate parties, we do meet resistance at times during our work, and there could be many reasons why a social worker meets resistance with families. One of the core elements of child welfare services is family-centered practice. If you meet resistance, use engagement skills to have a discussion around why that is and what support can be provided to help ensure the safety and well-being of children. Very important to be diligent in your efforts to engage. This goes beyond checking off the box of the list of efforts made. We really want to look for folks and try to engage with them like we want to find them. If your current strategy isn't successful, use critical thinking skills and supervisory oversight to come up with a new plan to get folks around the table. Remember that a broad and comprehensive team is more likely to keep the child and family safe. One example is working with non-resident parents. You may meet resistance there. As discussed, again, in the data from the program monitoring team, non-resident parents were only involved in the development of family services agreements 13% of the time. We have to take a look at why this is. Some things to consider when working with non-resident parents and trying to engage is asking if they have, or determining, if they have expressed a desire to be involved in their child's life. In what capacity and frequency have they been involved before? What will it take to get them involved if they're not already? And how will they be involved? And then lastly, do they have any relatives or other supports that could assist in planning for the child? It's important also to remember to routinely check back in. Just because someone declines to be involved in the planning process once doesn't mean that's for a lifetime. Continue to be diligent in your efforts to engage with folks. So just to summarize so far, we understand the importance of a comprehensive assessment, a seamless transition into in-home services, and engaging all appropriate parties in the development of family services agreements. Now let's take a closer look at the content of those agreements. It's very important to be sure that we are tailoring the services agreement's content to the strengths needs assessment. When there are multiple needs identified, these should be prioritized in order of what had the greatest impact on maltreatment, with one need listed per page. So for example, do not combine emotional and mental health and parenting skills in one page. These should be separated to allow to be specific as to each one of those needs and how that had an impact on maltreatment. The behavior of concern should name specifically what happened to have this identified as a need. Social workers should specify the condition or behavior affecting the child's safety or risk of future harm. Again, the use of structured tools and information gathered in the assessment will be critical for this piece in identifying what those behaviors of concern are. So for example, we may include Miss Smith spanked Johnny while angry, leaving a bruise on his bottom. The objective should reflect what we want to achieve in terms of alleviating maltreatment. We want to specify what that desired behavior or condition is. The parent should clearly understand what is expected for change. For example, Ms. Smith will demonstrate the use of discipline strategies that do not leave marks or cause serious harm to Johnny. One way to help generate objectives with a family is for the social worker to use a miracle question or scaling questions. Our family services agreements should also be SMART. They should be specific to the family and desired change, measurable in terms of progress towards the desired change, achievable for the family, again finding a way to balance the family's strengths and needs. They should also be realistic for the family. Families are their own experts, and when engaged, they can tell you what's realistic for them. We should take the time to listen. Time limited. The use of target dates for achieving specified activities creates accountability and enhances progress. Activities should be focused on child safety and reasonable efforts to prevent maltreatment. We want to emphasize that activities should address maltreatment and what would be done to prevent that in the future. Activities should identify what will be done, where this will be done, who is responsible, and the time frame for completing these. Family services agreements should also include steps the agency will take to help facilitate movement towards the identified objective. These steps go beyond monitoring and are specific to the need. Examples may include the social worker agrees to provide education on alternative methods of discipline, or the social worker agrees to provide the parent with information on local AA or NA meetings. This is a creative opportunity for social workers to share power, a family-centered principle of partnership. It will allow the social worker to balance the difference in power and create an opportunity to grow a productive partnership. So as Jessica mentioned earlier, well-being needs should be assessed for not only the child but for the family, to include the mother, the father, or other caretaker. So let's take a look at how those are captured in the Family Services Agreement. Child and family well-being needs. The first one is educational. Some of the questions that you may ask or use in assessing what educational well-being needs there are is, what is the child's current grade placement? Are they gifted or talented in certain areas? Does the child require or need special education services? Does the child attend daycare? Are they developmentally on target? Is an assessment needed? And what was the result of that assessment? Does the parent have any educational needs? What level of formal education did they achieve? Does this have an impact on maltreatment? Secondly, physical health needs. Where does the child receive routine medical and dental health care? When was their last checkup or visit? Where does the parent or caregiver receive medical or dental health care? Do they have a provider? Does the family have medical insurance? Are there physical health issues? And does anyone in the home require medications and or treatment for physical health issues? And then lastly, mental health well-being needs should also be assessed and reflected within the Family Services Agreement. Are there concerns for mental health? If so, what are those? Is anyone receiving mental health services? Does anyone in the family exhibit behaviors that would indicate a need for mental health treatment? If so, what are those behaviors? Is anyone prescribed psychotropic medications? If so, for what? Does anyone have a history of suicidal or homicidal ideations? And or has anyone been hospitalized for mental health needs? So now that we have discussed both the development and the content of the Family Services Agreements, we're going to talk about service agreement reviews and how often those should be taking place. The social worker should have a rich discussion with the family during each contact regarding the activities and progress within the Family Services Agreement. This goes beyond assessing whether or not they have completed the identified activities. We need to take a closer look and go beyond the surface to also address the behaviors or circumstances that continue to create risk to the children as an effort to prevent repeat maltreatment. These contacts may be occurring weekly or biweekly depending on the risk level of the family. Be certain that these contacts are occurring with all involved caregivers and the children in the home. The Family Services Agreement should be updated as changes occur in the provision of in-home services, or at least every 3 months. These updates should occur within the child and family team meeting setting for a more holistic approach to treatment and services. Remember, these agreements are only valuable when they are current and relevant to the family's needs. Tools that should also accompany the review and update of family services agreements include the Strengths Needs Assessment and the Risk Reassessment. When combined with the review and update of the family services agreement, time can be saved in the length of service provision with the family, as it provides both structure and clarity to the process. So now that I've set the context of what's expected in Family Services Agreement, Leslie will share her experience with case reviews of Family Services Agreement in Lenoir County.
Thanks, Amanda. Before we move on to Leslie, we have a question that's come up here. Let's see if our presenters are able to answer this. It says, can you speak about the imminent risk language that is required by an October 2012 administrative letter? The state had previously stated that it would be added to the Family Services Agreement, but it hasn't been added to date. Any of our presenters have that answer in front of them?
So in-home services should only be provided to those candidates who would be at imminent risk for removal or entry into foster care. To my understanding, that language has not been added to the form. However, social workers or counties are able to include that language within the services agreement themselves.
Thank you very much. And any further questions that maybe need further explication, we could always add to the follow-up document at the end as well. Thank you for your questions. Please continue to type them in the chat box as we go through the presentation. And yeah, we'll allow Leslie now to jump in to talk about Lenoir County's experience.
Okay, so our child welfare unit is made up of 2 assessment teams, 1 in-home services team, and a foster care team. We have about 24 social workers on staff and 4 supervisors and 1 program manager. In the past, we had blended teams, but we eventually moved back to split teams. After a program monitoring in 2016, we all agreed that managing split teams did not benefit the program areas. To be a specialized team, we've been able to pay more attention to fine-tuning our practice. It also benefited the supervisors to be able to focus on one area, which resulted in more attention to detail. So throughout our efforts of quality improvement, we decided to take a look at our case decision summaries and the initial family service agreements case plan. And some of the things that we found were that the identified needs were not behaviorally specific and included too much professional jargon. We also found that the goals did not demonstrate an impact on child safety. Additionally, our social worker activities were not specific enough or focused on helping the family improve their situation. Some of the strategies that we applied were team meetings, one-on-one discussions between social workers and supervisors. We've had supervisor-to-supervisor feedback. We've received support from the NCDSS, and we've also been educating staff on the connection between program areas. So the things that we found in the initial case decision summaries impacted developing strong family service agreements with family. So we used all the feedback that we've received from the program monitor and our own reviews to educate social workers so they understand more about how these program areas are connected and impact each other. As a result of this, we were able to enhance our practice by using clear and simple words that made it easier for families to engage and understand why we are involved with them. We've also been able to reduce risk and increase safety in a more timely fashion. We place a lot of value on the principles of partnership, and in that have also been able to work with the families to help them identify their own strengths and protective factors. So basically for us, even if we don't get the family services agreements just right, our practice is still family-centered, and we're working diligently with families to reduce risk and maintain safety. So we're going to look at a few of the actual part of the in-home family service agreement that identifies the behaviors and objectives and activities that are from a real case in Lenoir County. Just to give you some background, this is a family that has, it's a mother and a father in the home. There are 7 children. She actually has 9, but she had previously lost 2. We've worked with her several times. Housing has been kind of a recurring issue for this family. So after our last investigation or assessment into this family, housing was the main issue, but we also had concerns that the mother, she's a frequent marijuana user, so we were trying to determine whether or not her use of marijuana had any impact on the housing and being able to pay the bills. So this example, the way we wrote the behavior of a concern was that the mother uses marijuana but is unable to maintain stable housing. It is unclear if her substance abuse impacts her ability to pay bills. So the objective that was developed during the child and family team meeting was that the mother wanted to refrain from smoking marijuana in the presence of or while caring for the children. Some of the activities that were included was that she would get a substance abuse assessment and follow the recommendations. The social worker would provide education about the impact of substance use on children. The mother will receive education about the impact of, or the mother will receive that education about the impact of substance use on children, and the social worker will explore alternative coping methods with the mother, and the mother will use those alternative coping methods instead of smoking marijuana. So when we sent this in-home family services agreement to our program monitor, the feedback that we received was that our behavior of concern was redundant. We had already addressed the main concern in the stable housing section. We also did not identify how the mother's substance use was impacting her care of the children, and our concern was not clearly stated as it related to the marijuana use and the care of the children. So again, here our goal did not tie back to the impact of the children.
Leslie, really quick, someone was wanting a little bit more context, it looks like. They said, why was the case in home? Why did CPS become involved in 210 to start with? And so any more context you can add?
I cannot remember the exact allegations in the report, but what led to this in-home services involvement was that the family had they're chronically homeless, and she had become homeless again, and they were unemployed, and they did not have anywhere to live. Okay, so another example that we sent in, so this is one we received some positive feedback on. So this situation was that the mother had some unpredictable and aggressive behaviors, and she and the father were exchanging the children, and there was an altercation that occurred in the presence of the children. The children were caught up in the middle of it while she assaulted a person, the father's girlfriend, in the car. So the behavior of concern was that the mother is aggressive and unpredictable at times. She has assaulted a person while the children are present. So the objective was that the mother agreed to develop positive coping skills to control her anger while in front of her children so they are not inadvertently injured. Our activities included the mother would obtain a mental health assessment, follow any recommendations, take medications as prescribed. The social worker would provide education on the effects of untreated mental health disorders and the effects of aggression on children, then that the family would refrain from physical altercations and aggressive outbursts in the presence of the children. And the feedback that we received on this one was that we had done a great job. that the behavior was clear as to how it impacted the children, and the goal tied back to the children's safety. The activities were specific, and there were clear, helpful activities that the social worker could work on with the family.
Thank you, Les. We had one more question come in that either you and or Jessica could jump in here too. I assume there might be a little bit more to this case. There always is, but it has been told repeatedly that homelessness is not a CPS issue with the family not having a place to live. So anything you can expand on that as far as any safety concerns, just to clarify?
There was definitely more to it. Honestly, it was from over a year ago, so I can't remember all of the details other than it was repeatedly they were homeless, and they were continuing to use marijuana, and they didn't have a place to live.
And I think the questions that everybody has about this scenario kind of speaks to why there's a need for having more detail and more substance to the family services agreement, because that obviously left a lot of questions for all of us about what the issues were that brought this family to in-home services.
All right, well at this time we want to give everybody an opportunity to jump in the chat box there, type in any questions to our presenters. We've got several minutes here that we'll be able to answer them hopefully for you. So please take the time to type in your questions. Our presenters are doing a great job with responding within the chat box. They're trying to answer individually as questions come in. I see Leslie typing furiously right now too. I'll certainly encourage them to jump on the mic too if we've got a question that would be beneficial for all of you guys to hear the answer to, but please continue to type in your questions in the chat box.
I like the idea of getting you guys an example of a family services agreement that the reviewers liked, and I think we could probably do that when we send out the Q&A. Is that right, Greg? Yep. Okay.
Yes, we could certainly add some follow-up handouts.
And it looks like there's a lot of questions to Leslie about her specific case examples, which I don't think she can provide, especially with, you know, there could be some confidentiality issues. But again, I think all these questions speak to how maybe that wasn't the best family services agreement, because it doesn't get to the root of the behavior issues. Because, yeah, we know that homelessness is not a CPS issue, and we know that drug use in itself is not a CPS issue. It's got to be the impact to the child that's the concern. And that family service agreement didn't address that.
So one of the questions was in regards to suggestions for getting parents to have supports involved. Again, I would go back to the slide on addressing resistance, because obviously you may be meeting some resistance there. I think that requires, again, being diligent in asking those questions of who their supports are. You may have information from your assessment piece if they have other family that may be in the area, if the children may be involved with anyone possibly from school or daycare. You know, it does really require being diligent and continuing to ask questions. Lots of times families are pretty guarded and may not want others sort of in their business, if you will. So we just have to continue to ask those questions and use our engagement and assessment skills to determine who those folks are. Again, maybe at the initial child and family team meeting, those supports may not be there, and it may not be until after that the parent realizes how important it is to have folks there to help support them. So again, just encouraging you guys to check back in with them after that initial meeting to determine if there were folks that they feel would be beneficial that were not at the table then.
So we've got some questions coming in as well. It says, how do you effectively have a CFT meeting and complete an in-home agreement in one setting? Someone that finds themselves repeating a similar conversation, and they were asking if there was a CFT form that they should be completing at the same time. Any of our presenters want to answer that?
So there is a CFT documentation tool that should be completed for that setting. Possibly have the facilitator of the child and family team meeting complete that. How do you complete the family services agreement within the child and family team setting is definitely not something that is easily done. It requires being able to multitask. Hopefully social workers are familiar with the family as far as, you know, already being aware of what the needs are. So it's just working with the family to come up with, you know, more specifically what activities the agency can work with them on. Again, it's not easily done. It can be done and does require multitasking. Sometimes you may have the hopefully the help of a facilitator to help sort of move the conversation along as you're literally writing out your activities, or if it's the behavior of concern or, you know, objective. But of course those need to be developed in conjunction with the family in that setting, so that it's not a plan that essentially the agency or social worker has developed and sort of put on the parent. That's not how we want to engage.
Thank you, Amanda. Here's another one here. It says, assessments are now required to complete CFT with the family. A clarification on these full complete CFT, or if there's already an in-home case, or are these a mini CME, maybe they mean CFT? I'm not sure if I got total clarity on that question, Deborah. There we go, CFT, a mini CFT. I think it's the clarity we have there.
And Deborah, I'm not aware of there being a policy change. Could that be something that is just in your agency? Oh, Deborah said no. Then we'll have to address that in the Q&A. That at this point in time, I can't point you to any state policy that says assessments are required to complete the CFT, but perhaps I'm mistaken.
So I have a question here around absent parents. It says, when an absent parent identifies a behavior they want to work on, how do you include the imminent risk language on the family service agreement for that absent parent for that behavior?
So the non-resident parent could be included in the services agreement on the home that the concerns came in on, or they may have a separate agreement. It could be included there because it's in relation to the child.
And for our agency, I think for the non-resident parent, if it's
Sorry, Leslie's going to jump in as well. She was just having some mic issues.
Can you hear me now? So in our agency, if the non-resident parent has some just specific activities that they wanted to work on, we would consider helping them develop that using the voluntary page that's in the Family Services Agreement.
Here's a question here from Mecklenburg County. If parents are unresponsive or unable to be located within 30 days, such that a family service agreement cannot be drafted with their participation, do we still develop a family service agreement based on the initial plan, but not done with the parent participation?
So my response to that would be no, you would not be able to have a family services agreement without the parent's participation. Again, these are agreements that are developed in conjunction with them. I would encourage you to continue to make diligent efforts to locate them and document each one of those efforts in support of why the services agreement has not been developed.
All right, thank you very much. Here is another one. I'm trying to track lots of questions. You guys are doing a good job of typing in here. The auditing tool, I guess they're referring to maybe the monitoring tool, asks if kinship care providers are participating in the CFT/service agreement, and it's a ding in quotation marks if they do not. However, we give parents the option for participants, and a lot of times due to confidentiality and privacy, they do not want additional participants. What's a good happy median?
I would say making sure that you document that you've had that conversation with the parent, that they don't want them to be a part of the conversation. I think what's important for the social worker to do is to make sure that the conversations are had.
I would also be interested if they're used as a placement provider identified by the parent, why that parent would not want them at the child and family team meeting. It may be something that the social worker would need to explore as to why that resistance is there.
That's a good point.
See another question regarding absent or non-resident parents. Did the family services agreement have to be completed with a non-custodial parent who is involved in the child's life? That's the question.
They should be provided the opportunity to participate either in the plan that is developed with the other parent or caretaker or have their own services agreement.
And then a follow-up, how do you involve them if there is no particular recommendations for that non-resident parent?
Maybe it could be that they would continue to be supportive of the child. It would depend on the circumstances of the other home, I suppose. Maybe they would continue to meet or have contact with the social worker and report any concerns they have for their child. Yes, also child support. That's definitely something else to check to be sure that they are financially supporting the child. The child may be involved in services at school or some other service providers such as mental health or have some of those needs. That non-resident parent can be involved in that treatment and be supportive in those ways.
Thank you, Amanda. Here we have Buncombe County. Maybe more of a comment. They have a wonderful process for providing transfer meeting, CFT/FSA development at the same time, basically eliminating that 30-day window from transferring to the initial family service agreement. So it sounds like they figured out a process. If you wanted to get up with Mary in Buncombe County, not to throw you under the bus, of how you guys work past that.
And I just saw a question about how do you do a CFT at 2 a.m. when taking custody for on-call worker. I do not think there's an expectation that a CFT is done at 2 a.m. And I believe without having the policy right in front of me, I'm pretty sure the policy allows for those exceptions. It just says that the CFT needs to be done within a certain time frame. You know, there's absolutely no expectation that that happens when there's an emergency.
And the only thing I would add, Jessica, is that of course you're not going to have a CFT at 2 o'clock in the morning, but it should take place as soon as possible thereafter.
Please continue to type your questions in the chat box. We are tracking them. There's a number of comments and questions coming through.
And I see some real specific questions coming in about temporary safety providers. I'd like to defer those, and we can answer them in the Q&A, but I'd like to, since they're real specific answers, I just want to wait a minute for those.
Okay, we have one more question here coming in. It says, does the parent have to have a mental health diagnosis in order for it to be put on the strengths and needs and addressed in the family service agreement? So I guess the specific thing is a diagnosis. Do they have to have a diagnosis?
So the parent doesn't actually have to have a mental health diagnosis. There may be concerns that the social workers come across in the assessment, and then moving forward they may refer to a provider for an assessment that would lead to a diagnosis, but they don't have to actually have one in order for that to be identified as a need. It could be that, again, that there are some behaviors that they're exhibiting that are concerning, that may cause the social worker to think that there possibly could be, at least to warrant a need for referral.
Okay, and here's another one. When it comes to updates, reviews of the family service agreement, does that require a child and family team meeting for updates and reviews?
So yes, ongoing monthly contacts that social workers that you guys are having with families, you should be discussing the family services agreement at each one of those contacts, and your documentation should reflect that. The service agreement should be reviewed at least every 3 months, or as circumstances warrant a change, and those should be occurring within a child and family team setting.
We have just a couple more minutes if you guys want to type any more questions in the chat box before we move on.
Is that a informal or formal CFT? I'm not aware of the difference. I'm not sure what that refers to. Where you don't have a facilitator there, if the case is high risk, you're required to have a facilitator. If it's not high risk, the facilitator is not required, but the social worker may find it helpful, or it may be the agency's policy that each has a facilitator anyway.
Okay, we have a question coming in called, if the identified need on the initial family service agreement is substance abuse, but there are no tangible effects to the kids, how do we capture that on the final service agreement?
So that was some of the things that we have struggled with and worked with in Lenoir County, is that a lot of the identified need, especially when it comes to substance abuse or mental health or housing, don't clearly indicate how it impacts the child's safety. So we've been having, that goes back to the first example that we provided, where the family was homeless and the mom used marijuana, but we really didn't tie that back to child safety. So I would just say that that's one of the things that you would need to be working with your assessment social workers, to make sure that there is a clear indication of how the parent substance abuse is impacting child safety. I ask that question a lot when I'm doing staffing, or when they are, when cases are brought to me for in-home services. So that's just kind of where we're at in Lenoir.
So we have a question regarding use of a facilitator, and talking about that again. I understand if you have a high-risk case, a facilitator is required, but is that policy or agency policy? Is a facilitator required for moderate cases?
So a facilitator is obviously, as you mentioned, is required for those high-risk cases, but is not required for moderate cases.
Linda, we are tracking your question and might need a little bit more clarity, but it says your agency states there is a need for well-being completed, or at least more than starting it in 3 months, which can be daunting with limited services. We usually have an initial CFT and then a CFT before court. How does that impact being family-centered or family-friendly? Linda, if there's anything you can rephrase about your question, might be helpful. The presenters here were having a challenging time trying to see what question you wanted to ask out of that. I see another one here that says, what happens when the absent parent lives out of state and the child goes there for a visit for the entire summer?
It may be possible in those situations to possibly contact Children's Services in that state to see if they would make contact.
We've had a couple situations like that, and we've had some states that would make contact and some states that absolutely refused. There have been times that we have looked at closing out those specific children if there are other children in the home, that we can continue working with the mom or the father on the identified issue.
All right, we are coming up on 10 minutes left in our webinar. So we are going to move forward. Any questions that we might have not been able to answer, again, we'll capture in a question and answer document, be able to follow up and send out to all registered participants. I'm going to allow Jessica to ask one thing of you here.
So, okay, as we move to closing out this webinar, we want you to type one thing into the chat box that you will do in response to what you have learned today. Looks like a lot of people are typing. Nice. Focus on behavior-based language when writing out parent-specific goals. I like it. See, try to be more diligent with involving the non-resident parent. Tina said state exactly what happened when writing the behavior. Very good. Including the parents in our well-being goals. That's great.
I mean, one thing just to add in, a lot of people are saying that they want to write really clear objectives and behaviors of concern. The last, I think it was the MRS call that Holly did, there was a lot of focus on, you know, kind of writing at a 5th grade level, and that's kind of really helped us be sure that we were simple and more clear.
Right, I think someone had mentioned something about writing clinically, and I think that's kind of what we want to get away from. We want to be using language that the family understands. So, and it looks like a lot of people are responding to that in a way that they will write out exactly what the behavior was so the parent can understand. Okay.
All right, thank you very much to those of you that attended and responded with one thing you're going to take back to your agency. It's always helpful when you can transfer that learning from things that you've attended to the field, to the families that you're working with. Here is our presenter's contact information if you'd like to send them a quick thank you for being available today. It's also included in the handouts.